Part 9 asks for one complete answer. Oklahoma has spent 15 years emphasizing low taxes, low labor costs, generous incentives, and reduced obligations for favored industries. But the results have not delivered for Oklahoma families. Income growth is slower than the national average, major business rankings remain weak, and the shadow budget has grown while basic public needs compete for scraps. This article is not asking lawmakers to assume every incentive is bad. It is asking them to stop assuming every incentive is good. Before another dollar is protected, taxpayers deserve to know who benefits, what it costs, whether it changed a business decision, and what Oklahoma receives in return. The article starts with the burden of proof. For years, teachers, nurses, rural hospitals, working families, and public agencies have been asked to explain why they need resources. But companies and industries receiving public support often get a different standard. Programs continue because they have always continued, or because someone still calls them economic development. After years of disappointing results, that standard should change. Oklahoma families are required to prove they need help. Companies receiving public subsidies should be required to prove they produced results. The review is needed because the current model has not delivered broad prosperity. From 2018 through 2023, Oklahoma's inflation-adjusted median household income grew only 3.2%, compared with 6.4% nationally. That means Oklahoma families gained ground at only half the national rate. The issue is not simply whether Oklahoma is cheap for employers. The issue is whether the strategy has helped families move up. On that test, the evidence says Oklahoma is falling further behind. The shadow budget hides the trade-off. When lawmakers appropriate money to schools, hospitals, or public safety, everyone recognizes it as spending. But when the state creates a tax credit, rebate, exemption, reduced rate, or set-aside, the cost disappears into the tax code. The effect on the public is still real. Every dollar protected there is a dollar unavailable for teacher pay, reading specialists, rural hospitals, career tech, child care, nurses, infrastructure, or broader tax relief for everyone. A cost-benefit review may prove some programs justify that trade-off. But taxpayers should not have to guess. Tax code spending receives softer treatment because the language hides what is happening. A refundable credit can send public money directly to a recipient. A rebate reduces revenue available for other purposes. An exemption gives one activity more favorable treatment than another. A reduced rate protects one industry from the rate paid elsewhere. A set-aside reserves public money before competing needs are considered. These are not all identical tools, but each one creates a public trade-off. The review should make that trade-off visible. Oklahoma already has an incentive evaluation commission, and that process has produced useful information. It should not be attacked or discarded, but it examines the system in pieces. A few programs are reviewed each year. That can tell lawmakers something about individual incentives, but it does not give taxpayers one complete comparison of the largest credits, rebates, exemptions, reduced rates, and cash incentives. It does not place the programs side by side, compare them to other public investments, or produce one public table saying keep, reform, cap, sunset, or end. A major weakness in the current process is access to data. PFM reported that confidentiality restrictions prevented project-level payroll and employment analysis in at least some evaluations. The point is not that confidential business information should be published. Companies should not have to disclose trade secrets or sensitive business plans to competitors, but an independent evaluator must be able to see the records needed to determine whether public benefits were actually delivered. The public may not always need to know the company's name. The independent reviewer must be allowed to know the facts. The solution is not to put private company records on the internet. The solution is to give the one-time reviewer explicit legal authority to inspect the confidential records while remaining bound by strict confidentiality rules. The reviewer should be able to examine applications, contracts, payroll records, wage reports, investment commitments, payment histories, and performance reports held by Commerce, the Tax Commission, OMES, and other agencies. It should also be able to interview recipients directly. The public report can use aggregated, anonymized, or de-identified findings, but the evaluator must have enough information to verify performance. The review should ask 5 basic questions for every major program. Who receives the benefit? What does the program cost the state? Would the activity have happened without the incentive? What measurable public benefit does Oklahoma receive? And should the program be kept, reformed, capped, sunset, or ended? These are not radical questions. They are the questions any responsible business owner, investor, or family would ask before continuing to spend money. Oklahoma should hold the shadow budget to the same standard. The most important question may be the one incentive programs most often avoid. Would the company have made the investment without the incentive? Economists call that a but-for analysis. If the company would have built the facility, hired the workers, drilled the well, or expanded the operation anyway, then the incentive did not create the activity. It merely paid for something that was already going to happen. The review should separate activity that followed an incentive from activity caused by it. Supporters of an incentive often argue that it produces some economic benefit. That is not enough. A program can produce a positive return and still be a poor public investment compared with other uses of the same money. The same dollar might train nurses, expand career tech, hire reading specialists, improve an industrial power connection, support university research, or keep a rural hospital open. Those alternatives also affect economic development because companies need trained workers, and workers need stable communities. The proposed review should cost $600,000 and be completed within 1 year. For context, the verified original annual cost of the IEC consultant contract was $239,691. Oklahoma should redirect 1 year of the regular limited consultant review funding toward the comprehensive review and appropriate the balance. If the review examines roughly $1.3 billion in recurring annual tax code spending, $600,000 is less than 0.05% of the amount examined. That is not waste. That is due diligence. Independence matters because the review will be politically difficult. The evaluator should be an independent out-of-state firm or research team with expertise in tax incentives, public finance, economic development analysis, labor markets, and but-for evaluation. The contract should be awarded through a public request for proposals with transparent scoring. The evaluator should disclose relationships with major incentive recipients and be barred from follow-on lobbying, incentive application, or tax credit consulting work in Oklahoma for at least 2 years after the report. The state should not hire a consultant whose real business plan begins after the report is delivered. Too many government studies describe a problem, admire it from several directions, and then sit on a shelf. This review should be different. Every major program should receive a recommendation. Keep, reform, cap, sunset, or end. The final report should estimate how much recurring revenue could be restored by reforming or ending unsuccessful programs. It should also compare that money with investments capable of strengthening Oklahoma's economy, workforce, family incomes, and quality of life. Savings should not automatically remain inside the incentive system. There is already an opening for this discussion. Representative Chris Banning, a Republican from Bixby, has requested an interim study examining Oklahoma's innovation economy, workforce, and economic development policies. That does not mean he has endorsed this proposal, but it recognizes the right question. Are Oklahoma's policies actually benefiting Oklahoma families? Other House and Senate members should join the discussion and expand it into one complete, independent review. Oklahomans do not need to master every detail of the tax code. They need to ask one question. Do you support a one-time independent review of Oklahoma's major tax credits, rebates, exemptions, and economic development incentives?